Hello. I'm honored to be here and to have the opportunity to hear what I've heard until now about different points of view. As you know, we have in Italy many problems in this period with fake news and politics. And today, also the Pope spoke about fake news. I mean, he said that probably also persecution of Hebrew has been caused by fake news. I don't know if it could be true or it could be a sort of influence and fake news also this consideration, but we have a big problem and so we feel it in a very strong way. So I'd like to introduce the panelist, Lior Tabansky, of course, who was here until now, and we had a professor of the U.S. Naval Academy, Martin Libicki, Eviatar Matania, that you heard until now. And we can start to discuss from the last point that Lior Tabansky focused on. That is
Michael Sulmeyer.
Michael. Sorry, yes, because Michael Sulmeyer. Yes, because there was a sorry, because this was a substitution, so I wrote in another page.
Sorry. Where's Jonah?
So,
okay.
So I will start with you. So, do people? You think that people need fake news? As we heard in the last panel, and does perhaps our brain need a cognitive fast track through fake news, as some neuroscientists think?
No.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you can take your microphone.
Oh, okay. No. Do we need fake news? I don't. No, we'll wait. It's a good reminder for everybody to turn their ringer off, yeah, while you are here. And turn phasers on stun. Okay. I don't think people need it. I'm not sure I would ever set it up that way as a proposition, but I do think there is a certain amount of information that will always be deemed information I don't like. God, this is a great ringtone. How do I get that? How do I get that ringtone? That will be deemed fake or false or otherwise slanted. So are we ever going to escape it? No. But I don't look at it as a necessity. I won't say anything more than that. Martin, what do you?
To go with the great philosopher Paul Simon, a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest.
Why people love fake news, as he told us?
I think it's okay that if people like fake or not. The question for us is, let's think, those who think about defense issues, what difference does it make? Okay, if we figure out that it doesn't make too much of a difference, that's okay. If we think that it makes difference or presents a threat, then we are a very tricky situation, of course, what to do about it.
I believe that people like to hear their ideas and to know that a lot of others agree with them. So they do not need fake news, but sometimes they prefer to believe that these are simply not fake news because it's simply their idea that they hear from different places.
If the public were to become seriously vulnerable to massive influence, you think that we can maintain the liberal concept of responsible individuals that underpins the Western political systems?
As I mentioned in the morning, I believe that we should build a resilient population, which means we should educate people to look at different ideas, to try and not believe everything that they see. And we need vivid and independent media with different ideas. We need everyone to take responsibility, meaning not just government and citizens, but also corporates. And I think that if we try to do all this, we will be able to really overcome the problem of fake news. I am optimistic.
I think there's a pretty serious philosophical issue here. Okay, we, as an open society, we would like to keep the information sphere open to competing ideas, and on the other hand, with the new technological possibilities, there are so many new options to cheaply and massively produce information that is targeted to influence people's actions. So this presents with a serious challenge, and since we're not dealing with philosophy here, but with defense policy, I think we should try to assess better whether is it really a dangerous thing. As Dr. Matania said in his lecture, we have been, from Israeli perspective, it's a constant, so to speak, nuisance maybe, right? Not an existential threat to the system. Therefore, it's one perspective. When you hear other voices, especially from the United States, it may seem like the title of David Sarner's book, right? This is a perfect weapon. Finally, the dream of a military theorist came true. You can find the perfect weapon and achieve your goals allegedly without too much options for the defenders to resist and prevent it. Then it's an entirely different issue. I hope that the truth is closer to the Israeli perception, but we'll see about that.
I want to shift a minute from philosophy to demographics, and there's a reason for this. 2 years ago, there was a Nobel Prize-winning economist who took a look at life expectancy rates in the United States, and they found, not surprised, that for every group but one, life expectancy was increasing. That's a trend all over the world. But if it turns out, if you were white and you did not have much education, your life expectancy was flat. And that is correlated with the opioid crisis. It is correlated with what we recently was in the headlines, a 30% rise in suicide rates. I think a part of that in the United States arises from racial demographics. Part of it arises from the worsening economic position of uneducated people in an increasingly globalized society. I would like to believe, and there is evidence to believe, that healthy societies can tolerate fake news, but I'm seriously concerned that we don't necessarily live in healthy societies. And on that somber note, Mike.
Yes. Well, from demography to optimism, and or just more pessimism, I guess. I'm with you, and Eviatar's remarks earlier about when government is in position to determine what is fake and what is real. That's a dangerous position. And everything is a trade-off, but sometimes the trade-off is not worth it. And I think we have to be very mindful of that when we talk about, yes, there is a problem of fake news, but that's different from saying how significant is that problem relative to other problems that we could very well create or make worse by dealing with that problem in a certain way. There are going to be trade-offs here, but I think Eviatar's warning from earlier was very, very important to keep in mind as we formulate and pass the microphone to each other to say what we should do, or rather to have other people say what we should do, but we continue to not. So,
which could be the policy or technical remediation for this problem you would recommend? In MIT in Boston, for example, I've seen 2 weeks ago they are just trying to experiment a blockchain system to come back to the previous information that could be modified in the web. Do you trust that this could be a way, or there are other technical or other systems?
Anytime I hear blockchain, the extent of my trust in the rest of the sentence goes down. But then again, I have not invested in blockchain and Bitcoin, so have it your way. Look, there are technical and tactical opportunities to address different portions, different kinds of aspects that come up with the fake news problem. But there isn't one fake news problem. There's a bunch of different issues that we're lumping together. So I can't, it's hard for me to answer the question, what is the technical role? Because it depends on which particular aspect of fake news is troubling you the most. But regardless of whatever technical solutions you want to explore, you've got to also maintain the societal balance and figure out what those trade-offs are going to be by employing them. Is it going to be on a government order, or is it going to be a company or a platform that's privately held that wants to incorporate this technology for probably its own means as well and its own benefit as well, not just in the name of cutting down on fake news?
You mentioned authenticating information. First of all, the broad question about whether fake news is a serious enough problem to do anything that requires serious resources to address is an open one. I'm skeptical. But having said that, I'll offer a solution. Again, the air quotes are appropriate here. You talked about authenticating information. Would it be a useful approach to authenticate individuals? Okay? In other words, individuals may stand by their remarks when their remarks have no basis in fact. But they are more, I think they would be less likely to stand by things that are absolutely false if they actually had to sign their name to it. Now, I'm not against anonymous speech. I'm against falsely non-anonymous speech. Okay? There is an important role for anonymous speech, and if you want to hear it, as long as you know that it's anonymous, that's okay, right? There is an important role for signed speech, and as long as you know it's correctly signed, that's okay, right? But to assume an identity of someone, that is, you're not a bot, and you're not somebody from another country, but you're somebody from the country you claim to be, I think is an antidote. The problem is, it's an expensive antidote, and it implicates a whole lot of values.
I've drifted away a little bit because I was thinking now great idea to submit a research proposal that has big data, AI, and blockchain, and then and fake news, and this will surely provide some decent funding and career options for the future. Yeah, but I'll think about it later. More substantially, when people suggest technical solutions to hard problems, they usually imply that they're not making a value judgment or a political choice, right? It's like a neutral thing. Technology is seen as a neutral thing. Okay, we'll build a machine. It will figure out what's right and what's not, and we will not have to make difficult choices and trade-offs. And this is a false premise entirely. Most of the technical systems have embedded political choices within. A whole debate on platforms economy and a higher role that privately held companies hold now in the information spheres about these things. It has very little to do with the superiority of their technology. So we cannot escape making difficult choices. I mean, we can escape, but then I don't know how it will help anyone.
I would like to shift a little your question, because fake news, from my point of view, is just part of the something which I call integrity of data and narratives. These are two different things. And because the U.S. Has suddenly seen the fake news in elections, everyone in the world talking about this fake news of elections and the problem of elections. That's some narrative, because when Americans deal with something, usually the whole world is dealing with something, with the same thing. But I think that in a year or two, you will understand that it happens, and there are a lot of policy issues of how to mitigate this. But the real problem will be the whole issue of integrity of data. It's not just elections, it's much more than that. For example, competitive companies which try to damage the reputation of another company through some rumors or fake news. Is it less important than elections, for example? Or integrity of data or financial data or others? So I think that dealing with integrity of data, we need to find solutions, some technological solutions. We need to find some processes of how to, in the future, to be able, in the struggle between what is true and what is false, to really succeed in keeping and understanding what the right data is. And it's not just the narrative or the ideas about elections. It's much more than that. And yes, we need solutions. They will not come from governmental organizations, because again, it's economy, it's society, it's sometimes elections, could be terror, could be crime, could be a lot of stuff. The integrity of data, this is what important. And I think that we will find some technological and processes to really be in this issue.
Can I just do one thing on that, though? The one issue I think to bear in mind is that when there is an opposing nation that has undertaken a covert campaign, but backed by the full resources of its state security services, to undermine those institutions that are supposed to provide that long-term resilience, you do have to think, if you're on the receiving end of that, this is a serious concern, and merely taking it on the chin is probably not a good idea. So how a state that is a victim, not just of slander and the bad crap being said on Twitter, but of again, a concerted covert campaign, right, to do these things, I think you do have to figure out what is the best way to defend yourself.
So this is a real threat. But if you think about it, there is a difference. Again, I mentioned in the morning, if they penetrated into computers, maybe of some party or the election systems, and used the data in order to generate some narrative, or they just try now to influence transparently. This is the difference. When you use unauthorized tools, I think that this is something which threatens us, and there the government may act. And again, in Israel, I can tell you that I know exactly whose responsibility it is to defend the regime, the democracy, when someone is trying to damage the democracy. But just now, when it comes to some enemy, a country which is an enemy of ours, and when they just try to put things in the news or I don't care about it. When it comes to using unauthorized tools, I think that the government should react, and know exactly whose responsibility it is. I think the borders are very important, because I will give you an example of how it can be a problem. If it's not an enemy, just another country or some union who want to interfere into your system and have their ideas. Is it okay? It's not an enemy. Is it not okay? It's part of a democratic discussion. So what I'm trying to say, the borders should be, if it is an unauthorized action, retaliate, react, do whatever it is. As long as it is on the table, try to use your resilient democratic processes in order to mitigate. This is just a starting point to it. I'm not saying that I have the solution, but that's how I see it.
And how can scientific research contribute to improve a better understanding or resilience?
Well, I think I'm representing the next generation of people, not we'll pass it to them. No, anyway, we have things like measuring the impact, not in terms of how many people saw a certain message, but what effect did this message had on their actions. Okay, this is a very complicated issue for all sorts of ethical reasons. But I hope one day it will be possible to devise some sort of experiment. It doesn't have to be a real experiment. It can be a simulation or a thought experiment or something like this. This could help to measure the impact. Another thing is more general. We can formulate a hypothesis that in the current information environment, when people consume information, without the traditional gatekeepers, without the newspapers and channels and editors, but from direct sources via social media, we can generate a hypothesis that it changes their political behavior, right? One idea would be that maybe people change their opinion faster. Maybe the amplitude of the changes is larger. This could help explain a phenomenon such as the Brexit debate, right, which showed one data on survey and another data in real life. This may help explain the growing errors on polling. In Israel, for example, in a couple of recent elections, the margins of error were extremely high. Okay, way beyond what you would expect from the professional polling of public opinion. The Renzi referendum in Italy, right? I suppose like half a year before, the data was that the majority of people support, and then 6 months later, it changed. So you can have two opposing hypotheses. One is there was some subversive act by a foreign force. Another one that people change their behavior, opinion faster than before, and there are probably 20 other different hypotheses. Once you formulate it as a scientific question, maybe it will help something, I hope.
We had an invasion of fake news also in the 6 months.
I'm a supporter of science, and I like science. I'm not any good at it, but I like science. But let me ask this: is there anyone here from the business school or a business school in the area? Okay, one and a half, two. I think we've invested so much time and effort thinking about the innovation economy in terms of engineering and the sciences, and quickly go get your startup going and get Series A capital and get your angel investor. Whatever. There's an element here where I think the business leadership and the business schools especially need to start taking a look at what they are promoting in terms of thinking about not just the economic opportunity that is on the table. It's great and it's been wonderful, but also the responsibility that comes with those opportunities and creating these platforms which are put into the market with very little thought to what could go wrong. I'm all in favor, as I said, of science. I can mostly spell it. But I do think if there's one area of the academy that I would like to partner more with, it's not the engineers. It's the business school.
I think a lot of the problem is that we need trusted institutions to handle news. The problem is, and as most of you folks are in the cyber business, you will instantly recognize that the word trustworthy and the word trusted are not the same word. So there is a belief, which I share, but I don't, that becoming more trustworthy means that you are becoming more trusted, but the correlation apparently appears to be weak, and I don't have any clever ideas how to make it stronger.
I totally agree with Michael.
You like science? You like
science.
Yes, I both like science, and I think that we need to educate to ethics and norms, and so the whole of our leadership, whether it's in the business schools and economy or government, ethics and norms are sometimes much more important than other issues.
But coming back to the first question and to the previous intervention, if people love fake news, so the problem is not how to certify the news. So how can we provide?
So again, I believe that people like narratives, not fake news, and they like their ideas. And I can give just one example of what maybe some of you will not believe us, but I give you one interesting example from our experience in the government. The Israeli Defense Forces usually and all the time tries to be very accurate with the information it gives to the public. Now, it's because they understand that the trust between the IDF and the Israeli population, and because this is a compulsory service and all the issues, is very, very important. So they know that sometimes it takes them time to really give the right answer, and sometimes we lose in the information struggle but they keep to be, I think so, very accurate and keep their trust. I think that if we all try to be accurate and not to invent news, even if it sometimes costs us with time and flexibility, I think we will all serve some, I think, some objective which we want to see, especially governments.
You know, I think you may have put your finger on it. If we have a human need for fake news, right, and we need a supply of fake news, the problem isn't fake news. The problem is harmful fake news. So we need to generate a supply of harmless fake news to crowd out the harmful fake news.
Well, here's harmless fake news.
Good fake news.
Which is, but I don't think, again, need is the right word for it. But so there's this great headline the other day. I don't know if anyone saw this. Kim Jong-un offers to mediate a dispute between Trump and Trudeau. Is that fake news? Well, it's satire, right? Exactly. It's the Onion and the Borowitz report from the New Yorker, right? I mean, this is funny. I like this. I like it on my Instagram feed. You don't tell me to not have that. That's why. Do I need it? Well, probably not. If it broke, I'd still live. But is it harmless? It's pretty harmless. And what is different is that I know it's fake. It holds itself out as a joke. I know the source. They make money from being fake, and it's very well known. So do people need that in their lives? Do they need humor and satire that is not right? Sure, you know, that's probably the closest I could come to using the word need.
I just want to mention that we have some corner in a TV show in Israel where they show him, this is from the newspaper. Something like, birds in Australia ruined the Supreme Court. Is it true or not? And the one has to decide, and or the story behind this. And believe me, I never know. I never know if it's fake or true. Everything looks so that it could happen or couldn't happen the same way.
What unknowns are there in cyber influence operations?
Yeah. Well, let's start what we know is that the Russians are doing all sorts of things like this in Europe mostly, but judging by the volume from the United States, it really hurt in the United States. That's what we don't know. We don't know who else is doing it. We don't know yet, right, how to make them effective tool of a geopolitical conflict, right? It doesn't have to reach the threshold of a really serious conflict. But there is a promise that you can achieve all sorts of geopolitical goals in a competitive environment using information only. And this promise is now bigger because of the infrastructure that connects and the way people consume information and judge information. There was a lot of attention given to the question, how does the Trump administration create a picture of the world if we suspect that the president is only using his Twitter feed and not other sources. So for things like this magnifies the promise of influence separation. So let's say we have a dispute between Israel and Iran, right? It's not a new dispute with the current regime. Maybe we can entertain the thought that we can use influence separations to achieve our objectives, be it whatever they be, right? So there is, I suspect there will be a growing attention, and people will be drawn to it the same way people are drawn into big data blockchain systems. Well, maybe less, but this is the promise. And we don't know really how it works. This is, by the way, similar to the way that we don't know how operational quantum computing will work, or how this whole blockchain thing works. Not many people know, and I doubt that anyone knows at all, but that's my personal opinion, of course, not to offend anyone. So there is a growing attention to this and a growing demand, but there are so many things that we still don't know. That's why this is the place when science, be it basic or applied, must come in and clear out the field a little bit, I hope.
Go on. I just want to keep it.
As we heard in a previous, yes?
Go for it.
As my understanding, fake news is kind of a new term to old phenomenon like gossip or miracle or something that people really like. And I think it's due to information overload and the development of the technology, like personalization and machine learning and so on. What about education? Especially you talked about business school education, but what about the primary school education to how to manage or to deal with the information? Okay, we get used to read just the headline because Facebook is making us as a habit. But what do you think about primary school education in order to deal with this phenomenon?
I like education as much as Mike here likes science. And one of the most depressing facts that I have seen is, as you all know, the consensus that human activity is causing global warming holds in most of the world except the United States, and there's a significant population in the United States who does not believe it. And the more educated you are, the more vociferously you don't believe it. So, yeah, that was depressing.
The one area I would focus on in primary school, if it's a headline or if it's a book, teach the ability to interrogate and ask questions about what you read. Not to say that there is a right conclusion or a wrong conclusion about it, but to constantly challenge what you are told is the answer. That kind of critical thinking, the earlier you can teach that, the better.
Yeah, that's convenient because on the one hand there's a question of erosion of faith in institutions, and on the other hand we want to continue to encourage people to be critical of what institutions such as media and so on say. So there's a balance to be struck.
Okay.
Hi everyone, thank you for an amazing event. I think more of this should be more happening in cyber events. Not to be critical or provocative, but I heard the amazing speakers, and we saw the two most criminal states in the fake news industry, and we put China and Russia and the presentations all focus on them, but just for the clarity and not to create another fake news. Also, the Western world tried to influence elections throughout history. America.
That is soft power.
America, and I'm a pro-American, and of course everything. But also the USA was participating in affecting elections and public opinions in Serbia, in other places, and Madeleine Albright admitted it, that they put a lot of money in order to influence money. So just to put things in perspective and not to create another fake news or mislead the public, it's a much bigger issue to be dealt with on our ends, the democracies, and in the global community as well. A statement.
Martin.
It's a statement. But you have a question.
Okay. She.
So in Israel we have something that's a little bit similar to fake news, but it's fake news for profit. Perhaps other kinds of social media manipulation companies, but they're these lead generation companies. So a few months ago, Google was sued by a bunch of locksmiths in the United States because the locksmith industry had been decimated by these fake news lead generation companies, and the judge ruled, well, it's actually not Google's fault. Google's not responsible for what's on their platform. I think if you just change the law to hold Google and Facebook responsible for what they publish on their platform, it would do away with a lot of this problem. I mean, they're just not responsible. And that's my question.
Martin?
I have a colleague at the Naval Academy who's writing a book on Section 203 of the Telecommunications Act. Section 203 is the act that basically holds Google and Facebook harmless.
30, not 203.
Oh, well, panel must be done. Thank you. That's why he's writing the book and I'm not. There's been some erosion of that in terms of some sort of legislation having to do with sexual advertisement that I don't know the real details of. That's a serious choice and it has serious consequences, okay? 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have said, and people would have argued, that if you get rid of Section 230, you'll put those companies out of business. And now it's worse because they'll stay in business, but they'll do it all using AI. And I have always felt that AI is the polyester of the world of cognition.
I'm going to need a minute to think about that. This question about accountability, I think, is a really good one. And one way or the other, the technology companies, this is not just about search or social media, have managed to prolong a period of pretty low accountability. Not none. There is actually some, and those were some of the cutouts I mentioned about the First Amendment. There's no protection for child pornography, so they're accountable for that kind of work and being done. If it touches or abuses their platform. The question is, where do you start moving the line with them, but also to do it fairly across the board. It's not just search. It's not just social. I mean, if you leave internet service providers out of that conversation, I think you miss a large opportunity as well. So whatever is done, I just think you've got to do it fairly so that there's a collective sense of accountability and not, damn it, why am I being singled out, but other big company is not. Next question.
Yeah.
2:30.
I would like to know, maybe we had to pay, for example, for the services, will that hold them accountable? Like we don't pay Facebook, how do they make money? They make money through advertisements and through selling our information. So if for example, Facebook or Google were paid services, they might have had more accountability towards its users, because the users are the ones that pay. Those are the ones that, okay, I'm not happy with the privacy settings, goodbye, and they lose specifically money from you, not from advertisements and anything like that. So do you think if these services were paid, they'll have more accountability towards the user themselves and not just for the advertisers?
Not now. I think it's probably too late for that.
Well,
But
we do have
Maybe it's too late. But
paid services. They're called newspapers.
doesn't matter if you pay for it or not.
I can't imagine, okay, to address the question seriously, I can't imagine legislation that would force people to pay for it, right? We have an ecosystem, some of which is free and some of which is not free, because each of these companies are in separate niches.
No, but I'm not saying that regulation should make those companies. Regulation is one of the big problems, I think, or can be one of the causes. But so I don't think that regulations. But if they had this model, this business model from not exactly from the start, but at the beginning, maybe that would have changed. You know, now everybody is used to going to the internet and not paying, getting all the information. And, you know, if we start telling you, yeah, now you need to pay for a search in Google, obviously nobody will think about it because we're already used to giving our information and everything and not paying. But for example, if it was a couple of years back, or in just a hypothetical situation where we actually paid for those services, would they be more accountable for using our information or publishing news that isn't really a substance, that's really...
Let me point out that Amazon's business model depends on people paying for things, and they have amassed a great deal of information on us.
How long can we go ahead? Because we have many questions. There are two people before him and him. Him was before.
If you want, I can announce.
There are many questions. At least 10.
Isn't really the only difference between then and now is that these digital channels are creating an audit trail that we can track. Hasn't there always been lies during elections? I mean, really, like, I don't know. And now we just have this, like, audit trail that we can follow on how that lie was created. We can follow these means to their creation. I mean, it's not a massive opportunity to do data analysis on exactly how these campaigns work and to tackle them in real time. That's a technocratic solution, but...
Also, I don't think the auditing is all that good. I mean, there are ways of beating auditing.
For now, maybe they're not. I think the audit trails are becoming quite good.
Him?
No.
I have a kind of different kind of question. It seems that when trying to implement cybersecurity policy, organizations, government have a lot of problems because it merged between civilian, militaries, intel, and other entities. Do you think that the need for government today to address this current issue of fake news, what kind of organizational obstacles are going to be there? Needing to merge now between militaries and PR, communication, and election systems protection. From your both academic and professional experience.
You know our opinion. Currently, I don't think that we need a new organization to deal with it. Let's try to better understand it in the coming years. And meanwhile, we have enough organizations dealing with everything, believe me.
Yeah, as I try to imply, once we still don't understand whether it's worth the effort of any organization, policy, and difficult choices to be made.
That was him.
Yeah, so I have a question about more about cybersecurity and a global scale. So you guys represent these very developed countries, very advanced institutions, large companies that are able to find measures and develop these measures to track cybersecurity. But what about for smaller companies or for individuals of countries that aren't as developed and where this media also has a very negative impact on their society? What are some solutions that you envision for them?
Well, it depends on the particular regime in these countries. You don't have to be rich or technically advanced to take decisions and to select policies that you want to imply. So I think it's more of a political question. There's little, as we see, the debate right now is that the richest, the most technologically advanced country is vulnerable. So there is no direct relation between them.
For example, I've been in Taiwan and met Audrey Tang, which is the digital ministry there, and with his open platform, he's trying to fight also fake news. Do you think this is a possible solution for little countries, of course, because an open platform in US would be something impossible to create?
Open question. We don't know.
But I just asked, though, the question, you started by saying this is more about cybersecurity. Did you mean what can not the big states do to just not get hacked as much, or did you specifically mean it about the fake content, fake news?
So I guess like along the lines of both, where like smaller nations face like cyber attacks, and also at the same time like enterprises that are just getting started also face like fake publicity and media.
Okay, I'll put aside the second part, but on the first part about actually better ability to defend oneself in cyberspace from intrusions, unauthorized access, hacking, yes, there's a lot of things they can do. Patch your stuff aggressively, right? When someone comes in and says it's too hard to patch this, threaten to dismiss them, right? I mean, you must be a vigilante about this stuff. Upgrade your stuff to the most current version, segment your networks, right? There are things you can do that are not necessarily a cost, right? In like I have to pay for a product or pay for a service or an outsider, right? So there are things you can do.
Okay, thanks. Last question.
If you want,
Okay, yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Lior agrees. Can I speak?
Yes, last question.
Yeah, in general terms, I would like everyone to read the book of a friend of mine, which is Ariel Nair, called Defending My Enemy, because this shows how you must be very careful in giving regulations to any kind of information, and you have to protect civil liberties. This is the first point. Second, practical question. I have a problem with fake news, which I should address. The Italian Minister of Defense, who has just been appointed 10 days ago, is under a very heavy campaign against fake news. And she was my deputy in Rome at the master intelligence that I had in. Are there practical examples in which some fake news have been fighted with success, so that I can give some advice?
I think the Baltic countries have done a good job on this, particularly Finland.
Finland.
Anybody from Finland here? No. Okay. I know there's 7 people at the conference from Finland.
So Finland could be
a good model.
A good inspiring point. Okay.
Okay, thank you. No, but
just really quickly, we're seeing a resurgence
Thank you.
newspaper subscriptions.
Offline. Yeah.
Really from my own pages.
okay,
We can
sorry.
take this off.
If you want to answer, we can answer.
It's just that we've seen some resurgent newspaper subscriptions in Australia and obviously see similar things in America. Is maybe the market coming to its own solutions to fake news and that people are finally paying again for their content?
Martin?
No, Martin. It's heartening to see, but it's heartening to see from a political point of view, right? Look, here's the problem. We can all, like rational people, say that the way to combat fake news is to be skeptical, to look at multiple sources. In other words, for everybody else to be like us. The problem is everybody else isn't like us, and they're not getting much closer to like us anytime soon. The people who swallow fake news are not the people in this conference, right? Am I right here? Right? They're the other guys. And yeah, I'm sort of making fun of myself on this, but there's a certain amount of half-seriousness. You can't go around with elaborate solutions for people who have very different reasons for needing the kind of fake news that they need. Which leaves me, and I've been a Debbie Downer all morning on this one.
Okay, thank you. Many questions, many success of the panel.